we had an overview of what Blazor Assembly is. But let's have a more detailed look into the pros and cons of using Blazor. Because everything runs in a WebAssembly which runs in a browser, the apps built on top of Blazor WebAssembly come with a near-native performance. Also, Blazor doesn't require to pass data to the server with every single action, therefore there will be far less network bandwidth used. Likewise, if the network access is temporarily down, your app will still work. You may even have an app that is designed to be completely independent from the internet once you have downloaded the app. This would be the perfect way of building such an app. A WebAssembly app consists of static files, so you don't need a fully fledged server to run your app. So if you want, you can host your files in a CDN and make it available globally at a lower price. Since the WebAssembly apps use only the browser to run, it means that our app will use the user's device and browser resources to run. And last but not least, it runs in the major browsers, including the mobile devices, without having to install any plugins. But downloading and running everything on the browser is not always the best practice. It comes with its downsides, like your app features are restricted by the browser capabilities because your app runs in a sandbox that you don't have control over. Since everything is downloaded to the browser before it runs, this means that it takes longer for the app to load. Also, since the app runs completely on the browser, if you need to store secret keys, you have to store them in the browser, which means they will be downloaded in the user local storage. Now, you can still encrypt the keys, but that's not the best way to securely work with client secrets. Also, for your app to run, your browser must support WebAssembly. Well, we said that most browsers support WebAssembly, but that's not always the case. Some clients might still be working with older browsers, so your app will be restricted to the clients with newer versions only. In that case, you can use Blazor Server, but we'll talk about that in the upcoming part. Now, let's go to Visual Studio, create a project, and see which are the default files that come with a Blazor WebAssembly app. In your Visual Studio, go to File, New, and then Project. From the options on the right, select the Blazor app, and then click the Next button. Let us name this project Blazor.WebAssembly and change the solution name to just Blazor. And then next, click the Create button. From the templates that you get in here, select the Blazor WebAssembly app and click the Create button one more time. So the Blazor app was created. Let us go to the Solution Explorer to check the default files. And in here we see that we have the dependencies, we have the properties, and then next we have the root folder, which is normally used to store the static files of an app, like CSS, images, and other stuff. Now, inside the root folder, you are going to see that other than the CSS folder, we have an index.html file. And this index.html file at line 21 creates a reference to blazor.webassembly.js. In Blazor WebAssembly apps, this file is downloaded to the browser and is responsible for downloading all of the app's assets, including its assemblies and the WebAssembly bytecode version of the Visual Studio runtime. This JavaScript file also initiates the runtime to start the app. So basically, this is what makes a Blazor WebAssembly app work. Now, let's go back to the Solution Explorer. Next, we have the pages, and inside here we have all the components because Blazor is a component-based framework. So here we have the counter, the fetch data, and index, and we see that the extension is the .razor. Then next we have a shared folder, and inside here we have the shared components. The imports.razor file that you can see in here defines all the namespaces that you can use throughout this project. including the Blazor.WebAssembly and Blazor.WebAssembly.share. Another important file in here is the app.razor file, which is also known as the bootstrapper file or the startup file for a Blazor WebAssembly app. Just like in all the ASP.NET Core apps, we have the program.cs file, which defines the entry point of the app. And inside here, we see that the startup class has been defined as the Blazor startup class. So let us go to the startup.cs file. Inside the startup.cs, we see that the startup component for the Blazor WebAssembly app is the app components. So in here we see that if everything works as expected, we are going to render the main layout component. So if we go to the main layout, here we have defined the navigation menu and the body of the app. Now, let us run this app to see how it looks like. Now that the app ran successfully, we are going to see that on the left we have the nav menu. So we have the home, the counter, where we have just a button that we can click, and the fetch data menu item, which just returns some data in our screen. Now here, to be able to see all the files that are being downloaded on the initial start of the app, let us press F12 and then go to the Network tab and refresh the browser. And we see in here that on the initial start, the WebAssembly will download everything, including the DLL files like, for example, the Blazor WebAssembly DLL, the ASP.NET Core Components DLL. If we scroll down in here, we are going to see that we have the system.net.http and the JSON files, etc.